Now, GC Strategies, of course, is the two-person firm who worked on Justin Trudeau's $60 million ArriveScam scandal. But this app had this $20 million contract where this company did no actual IT work, and they have now twice refused to appear, having been summoned by committee. And the effect of today's motion will be to use the full power of the House of Commons to have these individuals appear before committee. It's incredibly important.
Well, some good news for the Conservative MP Michael Barrett there, as the Commons Committee has finally agreed to summon GC Strategies to come and testify in regards to the ArriveScam app. Now, Michael Barrett, who's been a valuable part to these hearings, actually came out with this press release a few days ago, and today Pierre actually threatened to arrest these guys and drag them in and told Justin and his Liberal MPs to get out of the way.
One company, GC Strategies, has had approximately $250,000 of contracts, according to a La Presse study. $250,000 of contracts for a 5-person company that operates out of the basement of a cottage for IT services, even though the company admits they don't do IT work. Well, common sense Conservatives are calling GC Strategies and its employees to testify under oath at a parliamentary committee. They're refusing. And so we've put forward a motion to have them arrested and physically dragged into the room to explain where our $250 million went. Where's the funds? Yesterday, Liberal MPs started a filibuster. That's a talkathon, talking into the mic, running out the clock to prevent GC Strategies officials from being brought into committee. What have you got to hide, Justin? Why won't you bring in these consultants to explain why you gave them $250 million tax dollars? If you've got nothing to hide, get your MPs out of the way.
Now, some people might think that Pierre is actually lying about the filibustering, but if you've been watching the committee hearings like I have, you can see that he's not. And Larry Brock, who's been another valuable asset to these hearings, called out the Liberals and said, listen, just put in your recommendations and let's get on so we can get something done.
Mr. Juwari and all other Liberal members who want to use the same tactics of filibustering can stop wasting time and simply file their recommendations and concerns to the committee so we can actually get to the actual motion itself. Thank you.
And I can actually feel the pain and annoyance from Larry Brock's face and tone of voice, because if you're watching these committees, everybody who's a witness just gives constant word salad when they're called out. And Michael Barrett and Larry Brock do a great tag team, Bash Brothers kind of combo. And I just want you to listen to some of these responses by these individuals that are being questioned.
Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for up to 6 minutes, please.
The Auditor General said, and I quote, "The Public Health Agency of Canada did not develop project objectives and goals, budgets and cost estimates, assessments of resource needs, or risk management activities." Ms. Jeffrey, did you develop a budget for ArriveScam?
There was governance established around ArriveScam, but it focused on the public health deliverables and the nature of the border measures that needed to be put in place and operationalized through the app.
Okay,
but there was no overall project budget established, as should have been the case in IT projects.
No budget. Was there a projection of the expected cost?
There were initial contracts put in place, but incrementally, as you're aware, those contracts were added to and were administered in sequence. So there was no overarching budget that covered those costs. Do
you believe this failure to have a budget is the reason that the cost of this project ballooned to at least $60 million for taxpayers?
When we look at the situation in Canada in March 2020, it was a novel pandemic, and the timelines and the nature of the response that would be required were not known. This was an evolving situation. I recall when we looked at how...
I appreciate your response, though it is not an answer, and you'll have noted in the Auditor General's report that the pandemic was not an excuse or justification for the rules to be thrown out the window.
Just take in how bananas that is. No budget and no projection of how much this could cost. So what, the government basically wrote her a blank check for her to just go willy-nilly and crazy with it? And even just the way she responds, she can't even just simply say, no, there wasn't a budget. No, we didn't have projections. She had to weave a web of all these little lies or storytelling. It's just like, get to the answer, yes or no. But again, there's more.
Your agency owned this app for almost the entirety of the pandemic, and you never developed a cost estimate for it. Did you do any performance reviews on it, quarterly or every 6 months, every year? Did that happen?
The operations of the app were evaluated through a governance structure that included Director General, ADM, and Deputy Management Committees on border services, and we assessed the operational results of the app as we went.
But the cost to Canadians was never included in a single review by your department. Is that correct?
The documentation of the cumulative cost was not a part of the documentation of that governance, correct?
Listening to this makes me feel like I'm getting pranked because you literally can't make this ridiculousness up. This lady seems so dead inside because she's been caught with her hand in the cookie jar and she just doesn't want to be here clearly. But not only did none of these costs get documented or evaluated, Michael then pushes her on who the Minister of Health was at the time being. And when you listen to her response, she's trying to protect the identity of that Liberal MP.
Who is the minister ultimately responsible for the Public Health Agency of Canada?
The Public Health Agency of Canada is part of the health portfolio and reports to the Minister of Health. But the contracts that were put in place were put in place.
Who was the Minister of Health that oversaw the development of the ArriveScam app?
The ArriveScam app was jointly developed between the Public Health Agency and the Canadian Border Services Agency.
During the time that the ArriveScam app was first developed, who was the Minister of Health?
At the outset of the pandemic, the Minister of Health was Minister Haidu.
Boy, oh boy, it's like pulling teeth, the way she just tried to skirt around that answer. And if you're unaware of who Minister Haidu is, here's a little refresher. It's Patty Haidu, who is now the Minister of Indigenous Affairs or something like that. So I'm sure you remember her during the pandemic. She was on TV quite a bit. So she's who she's trying to protect. Now, Michael continues to push on her and basically say, so this minister is to blame for all this. And again, this lady just tries to save her for some reason.
The Auditor General said your agency was responsible for setting the governance structure, which you referenced, which are the rules, procedures, and processes for ArriveScam. This was your duty at PHAC. That's correct?
Yes.
If PHAC is part of the health portfolio and the Minister of Health was Minister Haidu, then as the minister, she's responsible for this major failing. There was no good news in the Auditor General's report for the government, for the Ministry of Health, or for the Public Health Agency of Canada in that report. So do you recognize that this is a major failing, this $60 million boondoggle?
Mr. Chair, we certainly recognize that the failure to put in place formal project governance at the outset of this project led to inadequate oversight of the project and meant that the costs were not appropriately tracked as they were developed. And we have put in place numerous measures to ensure that this does not happen again. It was a large public health emergency.
I would say that not only was there a failure, it's not acceptable that they weren't tracked. The total cost, is not acceptable. Initial estimates at $80,000 and ballooning to $60 million with single source contracts and, two guys in a basement being paid, $20 million. These are failures. So the minister failed.
The contracts that were put in place were administered by the department.
So let me just be very clear, Ms. Jeffrey. If this is a failure, who is accountable for departmental failures? Is the minister responsible for what goes on in the department?
As the deputy head of the organization.
Who does
I
the
am
deputy head
responsible.
report to?
The deputy head reports to the clerk of the Privy Council and to the minister, depending on the subject, and the
To the
authority
minister.
that's being delegated.
To the minister. And the authority and responsibilities are delegated from the minister. This is the minister's failure, and that's what's been evidenced in the reporting by the Auditor General.
And as you could hear from her testimony, the corruption runs deep. She tried to protect Minister Haidu to the ends of the earth, it seemed. And this was the committee hearing on Tuesday. On Wednesday, these questions were put forward by Michael Barrett to another witness. And again, he gives the same kind of ring around the rosy spiel where he can't really answer a question. Even when Michael is asking him for his own opinion, he apparently doesn't have those.
On to Mr. Barrett. 5 minutes, please.
In a report, the Auditor General said, quote, our review of task authorizations that were issued by the Canada Border Service Agency and co-signed by Public Service and Procurement Canada, we found 2 resources being charged at the rate that required a minimum of 10 years of experience, even though the resources did not have this level of experience, end quote. In a word, what would you, or a phrase, how would you characterize that, Mr. Mills? Is that an example of bait and switch, or is that fraud? What is that?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Certainly, it is a requirement of those that are administering those contracts to ensure that the people being put forward meet the minimum requirements. So in that case, they should have verified that if the requirement was 10 years, that the individual had
So it's fraud. They lied about the worker's experience to charge a higher rate, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not in a position to opine whether it's fraud.
But are you in a position to say whether or not it was honest? My question is it a lie? Because the Auditor General wasn't opining. She analyzed the information and determined that what was said, what was signed off on, was not true. A minimum of 10 years experience that did not exist. So is that honest or dishonest?
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair, but I would not be able to opine whether honesty or dishonesty or administrative error.
So now we have this bozo here who says that he can't opine whether it's honesty or dishonesty or a clerical error. He's asking you for your opinion, whether you think this kind of thing is honest or dishonest or fraudulent. I think you can come up with your own opinion on that. But of course, he's like pleading the fifth, essentially. So Michael Barrett then pushes back and says, well, this is a bit of a problem, but also calls out that 76% of the people that were supposed to replace the original workers actually didn't do any work. And he says, oh yeah, we're going to be checking on this a little bit later on.
Okay. Well, that might be part of the problem. If we have a basic misunderstanding of what is honest and what is dishonest, I think that maybe we should take a separate look at that. 76% of the time, the procurement ombuds found that named resources did not do the work that was stated at the skill level that was required. You said that the skill level of replacement workers had to match that of the workers who were originally authorized to do the work. Has an audit or review been done to ensure that that is the case, having just noted that there was fraud committed as outlined by the Auditor General in the case I mentioned?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do believe the procurement ombudsman said 76% of names that were proposed at the bidding stage did not subsequently do work or have work billed against it. This is something that we are very focused with in terms of when people are being proposed so that we ensure that those being proposed are
Right.
most
When-
likely to do the
When,
work
when
and
they
verify
bait,
that
when they
do
bait the
work.
hook, when they bait the hook with the skill set that they say that they're offering, and then they switch it out and they make sure that they get the maximum price possible and the Canadians get the least value possible. This is something that we would expect that your department is safeguarding against.
And yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer to think that they would pick up on 76% of the productivity that needs to be done isn't getting done because why? The people that you hired to replace the guys who you originally hired don't have that skill set. So obviously the work's not going to get done. Michael then poses the question to the Auditor General if this is a standard practice, which she says clearly it's not, but typically if this kind of thing happens, it's recorded, and that clearly didn't happen because the recording of any of this stuff was abysmal according to her audit. Now at this point, Michael gives up the rest of his time to Larry Brock, who lays another question into the Auditor General about the RCMP and why they're not actually investigating it when they don't need any permissions. And then he goes back to the witness to talk about bonuses, which the witness takes a page out of the CEO of CBC's playbook and calls it performance pay, which we all know just means bonus.
To the Auditor General, does the PSPC need a court order from the RCMP to share their findings and suspicions?
It's my understanding that anyone can refer a matter to law enforcement, but typically we wait for law enforcement to ask us for a production order to
Sure.
provide evidence.
And there'd be nothing stopping them from doing that today, for instance, would there? To share their suspicions?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. Now, only under a Justin Trudeau government would public servants get a bonus for failing so badly. It's been discovered that PHAC paid out $340,000 in bonuses. How much in hundreds of thousands of dollars were paid out to PSPC?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I do not have the specific number about how much performance pay was paid out to executives. It's a normal part of the compensation package for executives within the government of Canada. And it's paid
Were
in-
bonuses paid out during the ArriveScam fiasco, yes or no?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. During the years of the government's COVID response, there were executives within the Department of PSPC that did receive performance pay.
Did
That
Deputy
pay has
Minister-
been published on the website. And
Did
it's
Deputy
available to
Minister Reza receive a bonus?
And if you're wondering who Brock is talking about at the end there, well, we have Ariana Reza, the Deputy Minister of Public Service and Procurement. In her role, Ms. Reza oversees key government internal services as part of the work Public Service and Procurement Canada, PSPC. Exactly who they're talking about was getting the bonuses. Again, this liberal government is full of corrupt people, but, you know, this is just my opinion. Love to hear what you guys think about this. I hope there's more committee hearings because this stuff is just getting juicier and juicier. But yeah, leave your comments in the comment section below. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.